I never expected that a routine meeting about my taxes would end with my shirt half undone, pressed against a cubicle wall, heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with money. I'd walked into that office thinking it would be just like every other year, receipts, deductions, a few polite jokes about my spreadsheet mess, and then I'd be on my way. But something was different this time. The second our eyes met, something between us shifted, and I knew I wouldn't be leaving quite the same. I'm Ryan, 29 years old, self-employed in IT, mostly consulting and occasional contract work, plus a rental unit I've owned for the past 2 years. It's not complicated on paper, but tax season always makes my head spin. That's where Micah comes in. Micah's 28. I've been going to him for 3 years now. Found him through a friend who swore he was the best numbers guy with a personality. And he is. Clean-cut, sharp glasses, always a little overdressed in the best way. Like he genuinely cares how he shows up for people. He's smart, fast, funny, and I never had to explain things twice. Every time we met, it was quick and efficient. He'd ask me questions, I'd hand over documents, we'd trade some sarcasm, and I'd be out in 30. But this year, from the second I stepped into his cubicle and saw him look up, that half smile that paused before it fully bloomed, I could feel the tension crackle in the air like static. "Ryan," he said, standing to greet me, "right on time. Wouldn't miss it?" I replied, trying not to notice how his dress shirt stretched across his chest a little tighter than last year. "My taxes would haunt me in my sleep." He laughed. Low, easy, and it hit me square in the stomach. "Let's make sure they don't." I sat down across from him in the small cubicle, just high enough walls to block us from sight, but not sound. The office was alive around us, keyboards clacking, phones ringing softly, people walking just beyond our little slice of space. Nothing private. Not really. Micah flipped open my folder and clicked into his system, asking the usual questions. Business expenses, rental income, new deductions. But the way he looked at me in between notes, holding my gaze a little longer than necessary, letting silence linger just a second too long, it was different. And I felt it. Felt it in the way my knee started bouncing under the desk. In the way my voice dipped whenever I spoke. In the way his fingers brushed mine when he handed me a document and didn't move them away right away. "So," he said, voice a little quieter, "anything new this year?" He wasn't asking about business anymore. I hesitated, watching him closely. "Some things feel different," I said. "Maybe just the way I'm looking at things." He held my gaze, eyes darker than before, more curious. "Yeah, I get that." His fingers tapped the desk gently. Not typing, just thinking. And in that pause, that breath of silence between us, I realized the way his foot had found mine under the table. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Not yet. But something had definitely started. The longer we sat there, the less it felt like a tax meeting. Sure, my return was open on his screen, numbers and forms in perfect rows, but I wasn't looking at any of it, I was looking at him. The way his sleeves were rolled just enough to show the veins on his forearms. The way he bit his bottom lip slightly when reading my expenses. The way his foot kept brushing mine like it wasn't an accident. I wasn't imagining it. Couldn't be. I knew Micah. 3 years of stiff handshakes and dry humor over deductions. And this was not the same guy I'd sat across from before. He looked up from the monitor, catching me mid-glance. His eyebrow lifted slightly, like he knew exactly what I was thinking. "I'm not boring you, am I?" he asked, leaning back in his chair, arms folding across his chest, confident, amused, and maybe a little challenging. I smiled, shaking my head. "Not at all. I just didn't expect today to feel so different." Micah tilted his head, watching me for a moment. "Yeah," he said softly. "Neither did I." The hum of office life continued around us. Footsteps just outside the cubicle. The faint sound of printers, someone laughing down the hall. But inside our little corner of the building, it was like the rest of the world had been dialed down. "You always come in around this time," he said, his voice quieter now, more deliberate. End of March. Like clockwork. I nodded, trying to keep my tone even. Yeah, well, old habits. He leaned in, resting his elbow on the desk between us. I started hoping I'd see your name pop up in the scheduler. That made my stomach flip. We were doing something now. We hadn't said anything explicit, but whatever thread had connected us before, quiet, unspoken, was tugging harder with every word. Every breath. I swallowed, my voice barely above a whisper. Micah, what are we doing? He didn't answer right away. He just kept looking at me, his eyes drifting briefly to my mouth, then back to my eyes. I think, he said, inching just slightly closer. We've been circling this for a while. I nodded, pulse hammering in my chest. Yeah, I think so too. He stood then, slow and quiet, walking around the desk until he was standing right next to me. I looked up at him, feeling the air between us grow tighter. Stand up, he said. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. I did. He stepped in close, not touching, not yet, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. His voice was barely a breath now. We probably shouldn't. No, I said. We probably shouldn't, but neither of us moved away. There were people walking past the cubicle. We could hear their conversations, the shuffle of their steps. We were just a thin divider away from being caught, and somehow that made it worse. Hotter. Hey, thanks for watching until this point. Please leave a comment if you're enjoying the video. It really helps us grow the channel and reach more people. And hey, thank you very much. Let's get back to story. He reached out then, slowly, his fingers brushing the side of my neck. I closed my eyes, leaned into it, let my hand find his waist. Then finally, he kissed me. It was soft at first, exploratory, but it didn't stay that way. My hands were in his shirt before I could stop myself, feeling the heat of his skin, the tight curve of his chest. His mouth found mine again, deeper this time, and I pressed him gently against the cubicle wall. We were quiet, careful, but not too careful. Not when I felt his hands slide under my shirt, gripping at my hips, pulling me closer until there was no space between us. Not when he whispered, "You drive me insane," against my throat. Not when I answered, "Then stop pretending you don't want this." Just outside our thin wall, someone laughed again. Micah stifled a smile, eyes wild with adrenaline. "We're going to get caught," he said. "Then don't make a sound," I murmured. And in the narrow cubicle, surrounded by everything we weren't supposed to be doing, we crossed the line. Not just with our bodies, but with something deeper. And neither of us wanted to go back. I don't remember exactly when I stopped thinking. Maybe it was the moment Micah's breath hitched when I kissed the corner of his jaw. Or maybe it was when I heard the low thud of his back pressing harder against the cubicle wall and felt his hand slide up under my shirt like he'd been waiting to do it for years. Whatever it was, everything that made sense, time, place, rules, disappeared. All that existed was the way his lips found mine, again and again, like he needed to make up for all the days we hadn't done this. His office chair was behind us, slightly in the way, but neither of us seemed to care. He gripped my hips, pulling me closer until our bodies were flush, and my hands were already sliding along the curve of his back, under his shirt, over warm skin. We didn't speak. We couldn't. Our mouths were too busy searching and finding, and besides, there were people right there. Just a few feet away, separated by a flimsy wall and the hum of office chatter. "Micah," I whispered between kisses, breathless. "What are we doing?" He didn't pull back. Exactly what we've both been thinking about for way too long. There was urgency now. Controlled, quiet urgency. The kind that made it even harder to keep our hands to ourselves. I pushed the chair aside and turned us gently, pressing him back against the cubicle divider. He gasped softly when I bit at his neck, then muffled the sound quickly, eyes darting to the side like he half expected someone to poke their head in. But no one did. That danger, the thrill of being just barely unseen, only made it worse. Or better. His hands were under my shirt, thumbs brushing over my stomach, tracing up my ribs like he was learning me in real time. My own hands slipped lower, gripping his waist, fingers brushing the waistband of his slacks. I was fully hard. So was he. Our bodies moved like we'd done this before, but every second felt brand new. A slow, burning release of everything we'd both tucked away behind tight smiles and small talk over tax forms. He kissed me again, deeper, hungrier, and I could taste the risk on his lips. The printer down the row fired up. Phone rang. Someone walked by, close enough that I could see their shadow stretch across the carpet just outside the cubicle wall. We froze for a breath. His eyes locked on mine, heart pounding against my chest. But neither of us stopped. We didn't need a bed. We didn't need candles or music or dim lighting. All we needed was that cubicle, 4 short walls, 2 warm bodies, and the years of tension that had finally snapped. Micah's voice broke the silence again, quiet but urgent. "I've never done anything like this," he said, fingers curling into my back. "Me neither." He leaned into my ear. "Don't stop." I didn't. We moved together, quietly, carefully, our hands mapping skin and heat and memory. We kissed like we were trying to erase time, like we were trying to write something new into the space between folders and filing cabinets. When we finally slowed, both of us breathless and wrecked in the best way, we stood there in silence, arms around each other, lips red, faces flushed. Outside, someone dropped a pen. Another phone rang. The world kept turning like nothing had happened. But for us, everything had. Micah tucked his shirt in slowly, his eyes still on me, and let out a shaky laugh. "Well, that was a little off the books." I grinned, running a hand through my hair. "Should I be worried about a penalty?" He stepped in close, whispering with a smirk, "Only if you don't come back next year." I tried to act normal after. I really did. But how do you go back to casually talking about quarterly deductions when your shirt still smells like the guy who just kissed you breathless in a cubicle? Micah sat across from me again, his posture perfect, scrolling through the spreadsheet like nothing had happened. And sure, he looked composed, but the edge of his mouth was curved just slightly, and every time he glanced at me, it lingered just a little too long. Like he couldn't quite believe it either. We were both sitting there pretending, not that it didn't happen, but that it hadn't changed everything. "So," he said, like we were back in the zone, "your business expenses look cleaner this year. You must have finally started using that accounting app one kept hounding you about." I gave him a crooked smile. "I did. Mostly because I didn't want to be scolded again by you in that tone." "Oh," he said, looking up through his lashes. "You mean the tone that makes people listen?" That right there, the heat behind the teasing, made my stomach twist. But I played along, matching the energy. "It's effective," I said. "Apparently dangerously so." He huffed a quiet laugh and turned his attention back to the screen. But his hand shifted across the table, close enough to mine that if I moved an inch, we'd be touching again. We didn't. But the space between us felt like a live wire. The office around us continued on like it always had, coworkers making copies, phones ringing, printers humming. It was just another Tuesday for everyone else. But for me, everything was different now. I sat in that chair across from Micah and realized just how many times I'd come here, year after year, just to talk about numbers. Just to smile politely, drop off receipts, and pretend I didn't notice how good he looked in a dress shirt or how his voice got low when he read something aloud. And now? Now we had gone so far past pretending that I couldn't even look at his lips without remembering how they tasted. When we finished reviewing the paperwork, Micah leaned back in his chair with a sigh. "Well, your return is done. Filed. Everything's good to go." "Feels weird that it's over," I said, mostly because I didn't want to leave. He looked at me, serious for a moment. "It doesn't have to be." My heart thudded. "You mean?" "I mean," he said slowly, "this doesn't have to just be one of those things we pretend didn't happen." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, really looked at him. Past the glasses and the crisp shirt and the well-practiced calm. And I saw something open there. Hope. Maybe a little fear. "I don't want to pretend either," I said. Micah let out a soft breath. "I've wanted to say something for a while. But this job, it's easy to stay locked into routines. Be professional. Keep distance. And I've never really pushed either," I said. I didn't know if it was just me. "It wasn't," he said quietly. "You've been driving me crazy for the last 2 years. That made me grin, and he finally laughed, running a hand through his hair, disheveled now in the most perfect way. "So what do we do?" I asked. Micah looked around, then leaned forward, his voice just above a whisper. "We finished the day. You leave the office like nothing happened. I wait 20 minutes, and then we meet up somewhere we're not afraid to look at each other like that again. Where? He smiled. Anywhere you want. When I stood up, he walked me to the edge of the cubicle. Our hands didn't touch. Our eyes didn't say too much. But when I looked back one last time, he was already watching me like he had been this whole time. Later that night, I met him at a dim little bar tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner, the kind of place with warm lighting and quiet music and cozy booths where no one paid too much attention. We sat across from each other, drinks in hand, this strange, amazing new version of ourselves unfolding one smile at a time. No cubicles. No spreadsheets. No barriers. Just me and him finally talking about things that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with wanting. And by the end of that night, when he walked me to my car and pressed me against the door just to kiss me again. Slower this time, softer. I realized something I hadn't admitted until now. This wasn't a slip. This was something real. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious. Not because I had doubts. But because every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying the way Micah looked at me when we said goodbye. His hand lingering at my side. His eyes like he wanted to say 1,000 things but knew he didn't have to. That quiet understanding. That warmth. I'd known Micah as my tax guy for years. We'd exchanged dozens of emails, shared jokes about forms and receipts, bumped elbows over deadlines. But all of that felt like prelude now, the slow crawl up a roller coaster before the drop. And the drop had already happened. The next morning, I found myself drafting a message to him before I even got out of bed. So, I didn't dream any of that, right? Micah. Unless we had the same dream at the same time, I'd say no. Cool. Good to know. Because now I want to see you again without cubicle walls involved. Micah. Tonight, I'll cook. There was no hesitation. No weirdness. No dance around what we were doing. He wanted this. I wanted this. That evening, I showed up at his apartment just past 7. He lived in a quiet building on the 2nd floor, a space that surprised me, filled with plants and soft lighting and shelves lined with vinyl records. Felt like him, and it didn't. Like there was more to him I hadn't been allowed to see before. He opened the door with a dish towel slung over his shoulder, barefoot in jeans and a fitted t-shirt. It was the most casual I'd ever seen him, and it hit me harder than I expected. "Hey," he said, and smiled like I was exactly what he'd been waiting for all day. "Hey," I replied, stepping inside. He cooked. We ate. We talked, not about work, not about taxes, but about everything else. His favorite places to travel. The books he never finished. His obsession with late-night crime documentaries. We laughed more than I'd laughed in weeks. And every time our knees brushed under the table, neither of us moved away. After dinner, we settled onto the couch, wine in hand, music humming low in the background. I turned to him. "So, just out of curiosity, how long have you had a thing for me?" Micah grinned. "You really want to know?" "Of course." He took a slow sip of wine, then leaned closer. "The second time you came in, you wore this faded blue hoodie, looked exhausted, dropped all your receipts in a crumpled bag, and smiled like you didn't even care." I blinked. "That's it? That's what did it?" "You were real," he said simply, "and hot, but mostly real." I laughed, setting my glass down. "I wish I'd known." "You'd have done what?" "Acted on it in the middle of the office a year earlier." "Maybe," I said, shrugging. "Or maybe I just would have stopped pretending I wasn't always a little too interested in my tax guy." That made him lean in. "Are you still interested?" "Very." This time, the kiss came slower, no adrenaline, no fear of being caught. Just softness, intention, the kind of kiss that said, "This isn't temporary." His hands slid into my hair, and mine pulled him closer until I was practically in his lap. Our mouths moved like they already knew each other. Like everything we'd held back was now pouring out without shame. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. We had time now. And when he whispered, "Stay tonight," against my lips, I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." The morning light in Micah's apartment was different. Soft, golden. It crept through the blinds like it was trying not to wake us. Even though I'd already been lying there, eyes open, just watching him breathe. We'd fallen asleep tangled on the couch, the half-empty wine glasses forgotten. His head tucked into the curve of my neck. Sometime in the night, he'd pulled a blanket over both of us, but neither of us had moved far. His arm was still around my waist, his legs hooked with mine. Like even asleep, he didn't want to let go. And I didn't either. It was quiet, peaceful, but more than that, it felt right. And that's what scared me. Not the intimacy, not the fact that we'd crossed a line, not even the possibility that this could all get complicated. It scared me that I didn't want to pull back. I didn't want to return to polite professionalism and yearly tax meetings. I wanted this. Micah stirred, blinking awake slowly. His face softened when he saw me still watching him. "You sleep at all?" he mumbled, voice thick with mourning. "A little. You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, just..." Still processing how fast this all happened. He sat up slightly, running a hand through his messy hair. "You regret it?" "Not even close." His eyes found mine, honest and quiet and completely unguarded. "Good. Me neither." We sat there for a moment, the weight of it all settling in. What we'd done wasn't just about heat or curiosity. It was about something that had been building for years in the background. Trust. Connection. A slow burn finally given air. "I think I've liked you longer than I wanted to admit," Micah said quietly. "Every year you came in, I'd tell myself to be professional. But then you'd say something stupid or smile at me like you knew me better than anyone else, and I'd forget every rule I was trying to follow. I always thought you were out of reach," I said. "You're the guy in the chair with his life perfectly together. I'm just the IT guy showing up with receipts in a shoebox." Micah laughed. "You still are. And I like that guy." I leaned in, resting my forehead against his. "So what do we do now?" He exhaled, voice warm. "We keep seeing each other. For real. No cubicles. No meetings with clipboards between us. And next March." He grinned. "We'll file early. Together." We spent the rest of that day not rushing anything. We made breakfast in our boxers, played each other music we loved, kissed like we were still trying to memorize the feeling. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't over the top. It was just ours. A few weeks later, I came back into the office, not for taxes, but to pick up a document I needed for a loan application. Micah was at his desk, surrounded by folders, tie slightly crooked, glasses smudged in the corner. He looked up when I walked in, smiled that same slow smile that had wrecked me the first time. And then he stood, came around the desk, and kissed me like there were no walls. A few of his coworkers stared. Someone at the front desk pretended not to notice. I didn't care. Neither did he. Because this wasn't just a one-time moment in a cubicle. It was something worth keeping. And I knew then, no matter how many returns he filed, how many forms he signed, or how many clients came and went, I'd never be just another number in Micah's office. I was the exception. And this time, we were writing a whole new file. Together.